The Russian Defense Ministry released a video boasting the combat experience it received in Syria. According to the Kremlin, some 63,000 Russian personnel have been deployed there since 2015. 39,000 attacks have been carried out in Syria by the Russian Air Force. Russian airstrikes have killed 86,000 fighters, the country deems opposition, and have taken out over 121,000 targets. Russia has long backed Assad in fighting against militants it deemed terrorists. Meanwhile, the world waits to see if Idlib province will be the next area under fire in the war-torn country.
We're looking into the situation in Idlib. It is obviously a complex one. There are indeed many civilians. There's armed opposition interested in settlement, as well as thousands of fighters from Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and Jabhat al-Nusra, which try to control this territory and prevent the efforts taken by the Turkish as well as others to separate healthy opposition from terrorist groups.
As the UN pushes to bring major actors to the table to try to discuss the crisis.
In this context, Special Envoy de Mistura has invited Iran, the Russian Federation and Turkey for formal consultations at the United Nations office at Geneva on 11 and 12 September 2018 to work on the Constitutional Committee.
And the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights maintains at least 7,928 civilians and 10,069 combatants were killed by Russian airstrikes. Russia may be asserting its dominance, trying to cement its place in future talks. Emily Rose, I-24 News.
Now, to delve further into this issue, I'm joined by Nina Larsen, our senior diplomatic correspondent in D.C., as well as Ivan Nechepurenko, New York Times reporter in Russia. Thank you both for joining us. Now, Ivan, I want to start with you. The Turkish foreign minister says that a military intervention in Idlib would be a catastrophe, but Russia seems to be still pushing for it. Is it likely to play out?
We've seen it before with other Syrian cities. And it was a catastrophe. The Aleppo intervention was a catastrophe, but it still happened. So it will be a catastrophe. It depends on to whom. It won't be a catastrophe to Russia, but it will be a catastrophe to civilians who live there.
Nina, that's an important point that Ivan is raising. It seems that while we're looking at the political meanings or military meanings of this operation, it seems that for as long as the war has been ongoing in Syria, the civilian population's well-being is the one that's considered last.
Yes, and this is the last bastion for the opposition. It's basically an area where almost 3 million people are hemmed in this area, and a lot of them, rebels and their families and other civilians, have come from areas that the regime has already retaken in the southwest most recently. And this is the problem here. They're all penned right up on the Turkish border, and that is why Turkey is such a major player in this equation now. Russia and Turkey are forced to work together because they're the only two powers that have any influence over either the rebels, that's Turkey, or over the regime, and that's Russia. But the question is, how much influence does Russia have in reality on the ground over the Assad regime? How determined is Assad to retake this entire province?
All right, Ivan, I want to throw the next question to you. We heard National Security Advisor John Bolton say that Russia is quite stuck in Syria, but that Iran has to go. So what is Russia's role in actually eliminating Iranian forces from within Syria?
Well, Russia wants to keep the illusion that it controls Iran, but the reality is that Iran is an independent and separate player. Russia wants to have the upper hand. Russia wants to say that, to show that if you want to solve this crisis, the road to that is via Moscow. But the reality, again, is that there are several players and they have very conflicting interests, not just Iran and Russia, but Iran and Turkey as well.
Yes, Nina, as if there weren't enough players already in the context of Syria, we have to also discuss Turkey. And it does seem like Turkey is aligning itself, at least to some degree, with Russia. This can't be viewed by with too much happiness in the U.S., where ties with Ankara are strained lately.
That's absolutely right. And we actually had some new developments from the State Department just yesterday concerning Turkey's ambitions to purchase the S-400 missile defense systems from Russia. The State Department now saying that they risk even further sanctions if they continue with this deal. We have to bear in mind that Turkey is a NATO ally of the United States and other powers, and it doesn't play too well if they're buying this kind of technology from Russia. But I think we go back to the fact that there has to be some kind of close relationship between the two concerning Syria, and that's the main thing coming up in the short term. Istanbul is actually hosting the next round of talks for the future of Syria. This is separate to the UN process. It isn't sanctioned by the UN, but nevertheless, on September 7th, Erdogan will be hosting major players from Russia, Iran and France to discuss the political future of Syria. But again, with this looming offensive coming up, we'll probably see again a parallel reality between what the diplomats and politicians are saying from the safety of a Turkish capital city to what's happening on the ground.
All right, speaking of those talks, very quickly, Ivan, I want to throw the last question to you. Will Russia be attending?
Well, we will have to see, but today Putin met with the Turkish foreign minister, so maybe the decision was made there. I think Russia wants to attend as many talks as possible. Russia wants to be relevant. Russia sees itself as economically weak, but as politically very strong, so it wants to exert its influence at whatever crisis it can meddle, and we just saw it in Africa, that even in Africa Russia wants to be active, so everywhere it can it will be active.
Yes, Ivan Nechepurenko in Moscow and our own Nina Larsen in DC. If it only were that easy to bring the two sides together as we do on screen.